A pueblo built of sun-baked clay, unshaken for centuries. A secret dance only men perform under the gaze of masked Kashina spirits. Today, the San Felipe Pueblo still stands strong in New Mexico, guarding ancient ceremonies, resisting erasure, and weaving their legacy into a modern world. Before there were roads or rooftops, or anything shaped by steel, there was clay. Wet, red, and alive, clay cradled the first breath of the San Felipe Pueblo people. It was not just earth to them. It was memory. It was bone. Every house, every pot, every ceremonial drum shaped from the same mud their ancestors once walked, barefoot through, even now, as highways whisper nearby and satellite dishes lean against old adobe walls. That clay still breathes history. The Pueblo of San Felipe sits nestled along the Rio Grande in New Mexico, where the desert meets the sky, like two ancient lovers whispering stories no one else hears. The air here tastes like pin and smoke and prayers. The village isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. The adobe walls do the talking. Their cracks are like wrinkles in a wise face, and each one holds a tale no textbook ever bothered to write down. The people of San Felipe do not just live in houses. They live in continuity. Each home is a vessel, a living descendant of the houses built generations ago. Some still have soot marks from cooking fires lit 100 years back. Some were molded by hands that had never seen a dollar bill, only sun and spirit. These buildings aren't artifacts, they're relatives. And just like the old ones, they are cared for with a kind of sacred stubbornness. Making adobe is more than mixing straw and dirt. It's ceremony. First, you listen to the wind, to the pulse beneath the soil. Then you mix, not by measurement, but by feel. Elders don't look at a clock. They watch the light. Children learn by kneeling, not reading. And as the bricks dry, in the sun, you can almost hear them harden into something stronger than just shelter identity. But it's not just the walls. The clay sings louder through the pottery. Coiled by patient fingers, painted with symbols passed down like lullabies. Each pot holds more than water. It holds stories of floods, of migration, of resilience through the long stretch of silence, brought by colonization. These pots are not decorations. They are breath held and released. For the San Felipe, clay is not neutral. It remembers. It keeps secrets. It recognizes bloodlines. There's a saying here, though rarely spoken aloud. When you touch the earth is also touching you back. And in the darkest days, when Spanish boots trampled sacred ground, when missions tried to replace kivas with crosses, and when the government stole children to cut their hair and break their tongue, it was the clay that kept the story rooted. After all, what survives a storm? What endures past war, disease, or a century of laws trying to erase a people's heartbeat? Not paper, not promises, but adobe does. Clay endures. Even now, if you visit during the Feast of San Felipe in May, you'll see it men and women in regalia, dancing the old steps on earth molded by ancestors. The dust they kick up isn't just dust. It's the same ground their people walked during the Pueblo revolt, the same soil that held their tears during the boarding school era. And as the drums beat deep, like the heart of the mountain, clay listens. In San Felipe, you do not live above the earth. You live with it, inside it. And when you die, it welcomes you back, not as something lost, but as something remembered. This is not nostalgia. This is survival. This is what it means to build a life from clay that remembers every name, every loss, every joy. To walk among the adobe walls is to walk through a living archive, And as we step deeper into the story of this enduring people, we move from the clay that built their homes to the river that remembers their songs. Long before stories were written in books, they were planted in rows, in soil, in silence. For the people of San Felipe Pueblo, corn is not just food, it is an ancestor, a teacher, a spirit with golden hair and ribs of silk. They call her mother not as poetry, but as truth. Because to grow corn is not just to feed a body, is to honor a bloodline older than wind. When the morning light creeps down the canyon walls and spills into the fields, it does so gently as if bowing to something holy. The rows of corn stand not in perfect lines, but in rhythm, in choreography with the land. Women press their palms into the dirt, whisper prayers into seeds, and know without needing proof that the earth listens. Always, in San Felipe, planting corn is a spiritual act. The seeds are sacred, handed down like memory. Not all are equal. Some are reserved. Some are blessed. Before the rains come, there is dancing not to entertain, but to speak with the clouds. Every step in the dance is a syllable. Every drumbeat is a plea. The corn dance, one of the most sacred rituals in the village, is not a performance. It is a dialogue with the sky, with the soil, and with the spirits that dwell in both. These spirits are not distant. They do not sit in golden thrones above. They move through the mesas. They hide in the canyon winds. They whisper through the feathers worn by the dancers and the smoke curling from the kiva fires. These are Kashina's powerful, unseen guides. Who can bring rain, protect a child, or vanish in silence when disrespected? They are not imagined. They are believed in, with urgency, with trust. As a child in San Felipe, you learn early to watch the wind, to listen for what is not said. Your grandmother might tell you not to whistle at night, that it invites spirits with no name. She might point at a bird crossing the sky and explain that it carries messages to your ancestors. These aren't bedtime stories. They're warnings, they're instructions. They're maps through the invisible world, layered over the visible. One, in the deep canyons surrounding the Pueblo, where shadows stretch like memories and stone walls seem to hum when the sun leaves. The spirits are thickest. This is where offerings are left, bits of cornmeal, a feather, a strand of hair, not to ask for riches, not to avoid misfortune, but to say, I remember you, I see you. Don't forget me either. Even the rocks speak here. Petroglyphs carved into the cliffs show dancers, stars, handprints, messages left not for us, but for the spirits, or maybe for the corn, or maybe for the wind. Marriage too is tied to the earth, to corn, to the roles passed down not by gender alone, but by balance. In this world, the feminine is not softer, is foundational. Women are the first farmers, the first storytellers, the first ones to call rain. Men may dance for the storm, but women coax it in their silence. In the birth of a child, both are present, the corn mother in the womb and the canyon spirit. In the breath, there are taboos, of course. Stories that must not be told in summer. Names that must not be said without offering. There is a sacredness in boundaries, in not knowing everything, because mystery itself is a form of respect. Colonization tried to flatten this, tried to say these spirits were myth, that corn was just a crop, that the wind had no voice. They failed because you cannot remove what lives in the roots. You cannot erase what dances in the bones. And today, in the heart of San Felipe, a satellite signals pulse above and asphalt cuts through ancestral paths, the corn still grows. The spirits still linger. And in the cool shadow of the canyons, the whispers still rise like smoke. As we leave the sacred fields and listen to the canyons hum, we journey next into the world of burned pages and unbroken tongues, where memory faced fire and still remembered how to speak. They never blink, they never rush, and they never speak in ways the uninitiated can hear. The Kashinas, spirit beings of the Pueblo world, do not belong to myth. They belong to breath, to rhythm, to silence. You don't ask them to appear, you wait, and if you are lucky or worthy, they come in the heart of San Felipe, where the kiva lies, sunken like a heartbeat beneath the clay. The Kashinas are more than symbols. They are the memory of rain, the discipline of wind, the protectors who do not need to announce themselves. And though outsiders see masks and colors and feathers, the people see something else entirely. Ancestors wrapped in spirit, forces walking in borrowed bodies. Children are taught early. The masked dancers are not costumes. They are not performance. When the Kashina steps into the circle, you bow your eyes not because of fear, but because you recognize the weight of the invisible world now standing in front of you. They come in winter, during the time of telling, when the fields sleep beneath a wool blanket of frost and the stars crowd closer to the earth, as if listening. The Kashinas arrive not with words, but with rhythm, with the crunch of footfall on frozen soil, with the drum echo that doesn't fade, but lingers in the chest. Each one has a name. Some bring thunder, some bring wisdom, some bring mischief that teaches discipline, but they all bring balance. That is their true purpose, to remind humans that the world does not belong to us. It belongs to harmony. During the ceremonies, a hush falls over the plaza, not one caused by silence, but by awe, the kind that makes even wind hold its breath. Men who hours before were brothers, uncles, sons are gone, their faces hidden behind sacred visors, their voices swallowed by spirit. In that moment, they are not themselves. They are watchers. They are judges. They are blessings in motion. Women and children offer food, song, and sacred meal to honor their arrival. They watch not for entertainment, but for messages. Because the Kashina never enters a village without reason. There is always something to remind, something to correct, something to reward. And when the last footstep fades, the spirit leaves the body. Quietly, no farewell, no curtain call, just the return of a man, breathless and spent, now once again mortal. To those outside, it may seem like theater, a colorful dance beneath the Pueblo sun, but that's because they cannot hear what the people hear. They do not know what it means when the eagle mask bows low, or when a clown figure speaks in riddles that aren't jokes. Every movement is layered with story, correction, and teaching that's older than any book. The Kashinas are also guardians. When colonizers came with metal and crosses, it was said the Kashinas retreated, not out of fear, but out of sorrow. The people hid their masks, buried their drums, whispered their songs into pottery and prayer, but the spirits never left. They simply watched, silent, hidden, patient. Today, they still do, even now, in a world of glowing screens and paved roads. The Kashinas continue to visit. Their names are still spoken in the kiva. Their dances still leave footprints in sacred dust. And the children still learn to recognize them, not by face, but by feeling. A chill on the neck, a hush in the room, a dream that returns, Again and again, some spirits shout, others whisper, but the kashina simply watches, and in doing so, teaches more than any voice ever could. As the winter ceremonies end and the masks are returned to their secret places, the people do not mourn the silence. They understand it, they trust it, because in that silence is where the kashina still listens, waiting for when the world is ready to remember how to hear, and just beyond the edge of this sacred hush, a new storm bruiser, storm of broken languages and stolen names, a chapter where forgetting was forced, and remembering became resistance, but clay, corn, community, 3 words that don't just describe San Felipe, they move it. You can feel them in the rhythm of a grandmother's grinding stone, in the swirl of a potter's hand, in the circle of footsteps pressed into dust during a feast day. Nothing stands still here, not even the past. In this village, motion isn't loud. It's gentle, repetitive, ritual. The shaping of a pot from riverbed clay is not just art, it's a memory passed through muscle. The women, with their skirts, brushing clay-stained floors, don't use blueprints. They use feel, they use tradition. The coil builds, slowly, like a story told without words. And when it's done, it holds more than water. It holds time. Corn is not a crop here. It is life braided into husks. Yellow, blue, red, it's all sacred. Every kernel is treated with the care others reserve for gold, and it doesn't just feed mouths, it feeds dancers, it feeds blessings. At dawn, young hands still plant rows with quiet prayers. Old hands still grind it with rhythm that mimics the pulse of the earth. You don't eat corn without first thanking it. At the heart of San Felipe beats something even more powerful than soil and food community. Here, no act is just personal. A dance is not a performance. It's a conversation with the ancestors. A meal is not a task. It's a thread in the long fabric of kinship. When someone laughs, that laughter belongs to the whole village. When someone mourns, the whole village bows its head. Homes are not built behind fences. They are built beside. Relatives, courtyards open like hands, welcoming. Inside, there are no strangers. Even silence feels shared, sacred. And within these adobe walls, children grow up knowing that every elder's story, every grandmother's recipe, and every uncle's carved drum is a gift with weight. A gift that must be carried forward. And yet, despite this ancient rhythm, modernity waits at the edge of the mesa. Power lines hum above sacred ground. Trucks roll past the very paths their ancestors walked barefoot. The children go to school wearing sneakers but return home carrying kernels and stories. They move between worlds, not always comfortably, but with determination. Because motion never meant forgetting it, meant holding on while walking forward. At the feast days, you see it clearly, rows of dancers, feet pounding earth that has known their families for generations. They wear clothes stitched by mothers, masks carved by fathers, songs taught by grandfathers. The whole village gathers those who stayed, those who left, those just learning. Everyone moves together in a circle that has no end, and around them, the smell of roasting corn, the weight of clay pots cooling in the shade, the voices of children chasing each other like wind. It's not just celebration, it's survival through memory. Even the land moves. The Rio Grande does not rush, but it reshapes. So does the desert wind, and so do the people. They have learned to bend without breaking, to migrate between ancient rituals and modern roads without losing the heartbeat beneath it all. Here, movement isn't escape, it's expression. The women who walk to the horno carry more than bread. They carry lineage. The men who carve wood don't just shape tools, they translate spirit. And the children who laugh while running between houses, they are not just playing. They are learning how to live inside the story. Because San Felipe doesn't preserve culture in museums, it lives it in steps, in seasons, in scent and sound. Clay is touched daily. Corn is planted with reverence and community. It's not built, it's remembered, but memory, no matter how strong, has been tested before. And in the next breath of this journey, we arrive at the chapter where memory was not just tested, was nearly erased. There are colors that live in memory long after they've been banned. For the people of San Felipe, one of those colors is blue, not the pale kind that hangs in a summer sky, but a deep, sacred turquoise, the kind worn by spirits and carved into prayer. It was once painted across foreheads, woven into shawls, and placed like lightning bolts into the ears of those who carried power. But one day it was called sinful. One day it was outlawed. What followed wasn't war in the traditional sense. It was quieter, crueler. It was a war against paintbrushes, against language, against skin. When Spanish colonizers arrived, they came with crosses and muskets, but also with mirrors. They said, "Wipe that off your face. Hide those marks. Wear this instead." And slowly, the sacred blue vanished from the surface. But not from the blood. Beneath sleeves and under collars, there were still lines. Faint, ancient tattoo swirls, dots, marks left by cactus needles and soot worn like whispers. Women hid them under long braids. Men covered them with Catholic medals. They did not speak of them in daylight, but they never forgot what they meant. Some of those tattoos were map symbols of clans, of migrations, of star paths carved into muscle. Others were blessings, protection from lightning, from drought, from spirits that came at night. A tattoo on the wrist might mean a girl had entered womanhood. A mark behind the ear could mean a boy had danced his first harvest. None were decoration. All were declaration. But in the eyes of the missionaries, they were something else, pagan, primitive, dangerous. So, the pressure mounted. Confession booths replaced kiva ceremonies. Baptism washed away names that once echoed like prayers through the canyons. Even young girls were renamed, given saints to replace their spirit animals. And yet still there were elders who remembered where the tattoos were placed. There are stories of women in the 1800s who, while kneading bread, would draw symbols in flour on the table just for a second, then erase them. A way to remind their daughters. A way to pass on what couldn't be spoken aloud. There are stories of men who, drunk on memory more than alcohol, whispered Correa's words into the ears of babies before the priest could arrive. Some would say the tattoos are gone now, that the ink faded when the needles were taken. But the truth is more haunting. The tattoos are still here, hidden beneath generations of quiet defiance. In the way a dancer lifts their hand during a ceremony, in the way a child traces something unseen on a cold window pane, in the flash of turquoise that shows from under a blouse on feast day, and in recent years, something unexpected has returned. Young artists from San Felipe have started asking questions their parents were too scared to voice. They are drawing again, asking grandmothers about symbols, studying the blue, not for rebellion, but for remembrance. One artist tattooed a single dot on her hand, placed exactly where her great-grandmother said hers once was. Another carved a pattern into a silver pendant shaped like a cornstalk. A man working as a carpenter painted his tool handles with swirling blue waves that resembled water tattoos from a century ago. These are not acts of vanity, they are acts of resurrection. The forbidden blue is being unburied. One brushstroke at a time, one bold earring, one whispered song. But this return is not without pain. There are still those in San Felipe who remember the punishments, who flinch when they hear the word tattoo, who wonder if digging up old symbols might bring new suffering, who ask, quietly, will they take it from us again? Because memory, when stitched back together, can bleed. Still, it beats louder than fear. The people of San Felipe are not just reclaiming colors and marks, they are reclaiming permission to be whole. And in doing so, they remind us all, culture is not just what survives, it's what dares to reappear and just beyond. The lines and ink, there's something even more dangerous and beautiful waiting. A language so sacred, it once could only be spoken under moonlight. A language that danced, not with words, but with fire. They came not as whispers, but as thunder, hooves over dry earth. Crosses held high, lances gleaming in the sun like teeth. The Spanish did not arrive softly. They arrived as a storm, proud, armored, speaking a language no Pueblo ear had heard before. And yet, long before a single musket was fired, the land already felt something was coming. The corn grew uneasy. The wind stopped singing. The people of San Felipe had lived in rhythm with the river, the sky, the sun's return. Their weapons were stone and bone, enough for hunting, enough for ceremony, never meant for conquest. But the Spanish came from a world where war was a profession. They brought the horse, a beast the Pueblo had never seen, and made it thunder through sacred paths. They brought the wheel, not to share, but to turn the grindstone of power in 1598. Juan de Ocate marched into New Mexico with brutality cloaked in religion. To the Spanish, the Pueblos were villages to be purified, to be bent into submission through scripture, sword, and starvation. The kivas were labeled dens of sorcery. The dancers were called devil's work. The children were taken. The men were broken. The women were baptized with names that meant nothing to their blood. The horse, though, changed everything. It wasn't just a tool of war. It was a symbol of Spanish dominance. Towering above the people, fast and controlled, the horse became a reminder. Your world is now smaller, your steps slower. Spanish soldiers rode through villages like gods on four legs, trampling the dust where elders had once whispered prophecies. And yet, the people of San Felipe were not made of silence. Rebellion doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it starts with refusal. Refusal to speak Spanish. Refusal to kneel before a god carved by another hand. The Pueblo Revolt of 1680 wasn't just a moment, it was a heartbeat. A beat that began in prayer circles and spread through runners who carried knots of rope as code. San Felipe was part of that heartbeat, a part of the whisper that turned to a roar. On that August morning, the Pueblos struck back. 70 years of cruelty burst like a dam. Churches burned, missionaries fell, Spanish blood met Pueblo stone. For a short, shining breath of history, the land was free again. San Felipe danced beneath the stars as their ancestors had bare feet on earth, unashamed, reborn. But freedom, like fire, is hard to contain. By 1692, the Spanish returned, more cautious this time, more cunning. They brought gifts, promises, softened voices, but also soldiers in the shadows. The cycle began again, not with swords this time, but with laws, taxes, manipulation. The invasion had adapted, so did the resistance. The people of San Felipe learned the art of camouflage, not on the skin, but in the spirit. Outwardly, they obeyed. Inwardly, they endured. They allowed baptisms, but whispered the old names after sunset. They accepted Spanish saints, but still left cornmeal offerings under the moon. The horse, once a symbol of dominance, was eventually mastered. Pueblo men learned to ride it too, not in chains, but in ceremony. Over time, the horse became more than a symbol of power. It became a paradox, a beast of the invader, tamed by the invaded, a tool of resistance, stolen from the very hand that tried to crush them. Lance became drumstick, saddle became symbol, and yet the scars of that invasion still echo. Some speak of the churches that still stand where sacred kivas once did. Others carry stories of ancestors who disappeared, not in battle, but in silence. One woman from San Felipe once said, "We were not defeated, we were disguised," because survival is not surrender, it's strategy. Today, San Felipe still rides, not just horses, but memory. The long roads through the desert are carved with hoofprints and blood, but they lead home, back to the village where the stories didn't die, they hid. Back to the fire that was never extinguished, only buried and beyond the reach of Spanish armor and European maps lies something even they couldn't steal. The drumbeat that survived under their boots, the river that whispered through every massacre, the language that held firm even as names were erased. Now the dust has settled, but the footprints remain, and just beyond the final hoofprint, another kind of war waited, one made of paper and promises, not swords. There are stories you whisper only behind adobe walls, under the hush of dusk where candles flicker and saints stare from niches carved by foreign hands. In San Felipe, resistance didn't always come with fire or arrows. Sometimes it wore a mask. Sometimes it stood in the church pew with folded hands and defiance hidden behind lowered eyes. The Spanish missions arrived like monuments to permanence. Grand, looming buildings carved into the bones of the desert, filled with hymns no one recognized, prayers that tasted strange on native tongues. Priests came in robes, speaking of salvation, but their God came with rules. No dancing, no drumming, no speaking your language outside your home. What they couldn't destroy with swords, they tried to erase with silence. But the people of San Felipe had survived worse than silence. They learned to play two songs at once, one for the priests, one for the ancestors. They held feast days that honored Catholic saints, but danced steps older than the crosses. They told Bible stories in keres, but with rhythms that echoed the old chants. The missions may have been built from stone and faith, but behind their walls, San Felipe masked its survival in plain sight. Children were baptized under Spanish names, but their real names, their true names, lived in the breath of grandmothers and the rhythm of the drum. A boy might be Miguel in the mission book, but to his people he was still Skywatcher. A girl might be called Maria by the priest, but in her heart she remained River's flame. This wasn't surrender. This was strategy. Inside the churches, wooden saints watched with painted eyes. Outside, masked dancers prepared for rituals that were never forgotten. The masks told stories, not just of gods and spirits, but of survival. Each carving, each feather, each color was chosen with intention. Some masks smiled, others snarled, but all of them said the same thing: we're still here. Even the dances that missionaries dismissed as childish or superstitious were encoded messages, movements passed down in secret, footsteps that traced the memory of stolen songs. The kashina spirits still came, but now they danced between pews, hiding in plain sight. The same hands that folded during Mass also carved sacred patterns into drums, into pottery, into time itself. Resistance didn't always scream. Sometimes it whispered. The masks became a language, a way to speak when words were dangerous. They told stories of the sky and the river, of tricksters and protectors, of worlds that still spun underneath the weight of conquest. A single dance could hold centuries. A single drumbeat could echo across generations. And yet, the pressure to disappear never stopped. Missionaries kept coming. Laws were passed. Punishments were harsh. Children were sent to boarding schools, where their hair was cut, their language banned, their identity stripped and replaced with uniforms and English grammar. But San Felipe never forgot how to hide the sacred in the ordinary. Women embroidered ancient patterns into modern dresses. Men sang the old songs while hauling water or chopping wood. Grandfathers whispered stories behind dusty curtains. Grandmothers made sure babies knew which words were safe for the priest and which belonged to the fire. By the early 1900s, most outsiders assumed the traditions were gone. They saw churches and thought the conversion was complete. But they never looked behind the masks. They never listened closely enough to hear that the chants had not gone quiet. They had simply changed form. To this day, San Felipe's ceremonial life remains one of the most protected in all of Pueblo culture. Outsiders are not allowed to record the dancers. Cameras are banned. The tribe guards its rituals fiercely, not out of secrecy, but survival. Because when your past has been nearly stolen, your future depends on what you choose to keep hidden. The mission bells may still ring, but the drum never stopped. The masks still dance, the songs still rise, and the resistance still moves, not in battlefields, but in kitchens, in art, in memory. Because in San Felipe, every day is a decision to remember, and just as the mission walls still stand, so do the stories they failed to erase. The masks, once tools of survival, now speak of pride, not hiding but honoring. And as the masks are passed from elder to child, another question begins to rise. What happens when survival turns into revival? He doesn't write in ink. He doesn't own a journal. But if he did, the pages would smell like cedar smoke and river dust. His words would be carved in footsteps, carried in the hush of early morning when the world is still wrapped in blue. In San Felipe, fatherhood is a ceremony, a quiet kind, woven from duty and dreams no one says aloud. If you saw him, you might not look twice. A man with weathered hands, long braid tucked into his jacket, walking toward the fields. But he carries more than tools. He carries memory and burden and love so patient it bends time. He was born in a house made of adobe and prayers, where stories clung to the walls like smoke. His own father didn't say much. Most didn't, but the lessons were clear. Wake before the sun, walk with the earth, not on it. Speak less, listen more. Hold the drumbeat inside your chest even when the music is gone. When his first child arrived, it wasn't in a hospital. It was under a sky so wide it seemed to hold every ancestor. A grandmother whispered blessings. A cousin held water warmed over fire. And he, weeping without shame, held his daughter as if the entire tribe had returned through her tiny breath. He never told her this, but every time he braids her hair, he remembers the stories of the kashina spirits. He thinks of the dancers, the masks, the weight of what must be passed down quietly. She thinks it's just hair, but to him it's ceremony. A way of saying, you belong, you are rooted. He teaches her things the world doesn't test for. How to read clouds, how to speak to corn before you pick it, how to find the oldest riverstone by feel, how to know when someone's spirit is tired, even if they smile. He worries every day. Worries. She'll forget their words. Worries she'll get asked too many times, do you still live in teepees? Worries that the outside world, with its fluorescent noise and fast answers, will pull her away from the old ways that have no shortcuts. Worries that the silence she needs to hear her spirit will be drowned in someone else's story. And yet he hopes she'll dance the spring ceremony with pride. Hopes she whisper back to the canyon and recognize the echo. Hopes she see her brown skin and her black braid not as different, but as sacred. Hopes she finds strength not in running from her past, but in walking right through it. In this silent diary, he keeps the names of all the men who were told not to cry, all the fathers who lost their language in boarding schools, who had their hair cut short, their songs mocked, their rituals banned. He remembers them so he can break the cycle. He does something different. He sings lullabies in keres. He tells bedtime stories where girls outsmart monsters. He cooks blue corn mush on ceremony days and tells his sons that softness is not weakness. It's a weapon. That love, when given freely, is the sharpest arrow a father can offer. On feast days, when the plaza fills with dancers, and the drums rise like thunder from the earth, he stands still, not because he is tired, but because his heart is too full to move. He watches his children step into the dance, barefoot, painted, mask-downed. He sees the entire nation reborn. He knows the outside world may never fully understand what it means to be a Pueblo father. It doesn't come with trophies. There are no graduation ceremonies for keeping traditions alive, no medals for raising children with ancestral names. But still, he writes this diary, wordless, invisible, each act of care another page. At night, when the house quiets and the children sleep, he steps outside and looks up at the stars. Same ones his great-grandfather watched, same ones the kashina dancers call home. He says nothing, but his silence is loud with prayer. Let them remember who they are. Let them carry the songs. Let them know they are loved not just by me, but by all who came before. He doesn't write in ink, but his story is written in the children who dance, the language that refuses to die, the footsteps that keep circling the sacred fire. And tomorrow he will rise before the sun again. The river doesn't care about fences. It never has. It flows, the way it always has, slow in winter, full in spring, sacred always. But men drew lines where water once moved freely, and the Pueblo of San Felipe has spent over a century fighting to keep what should never have been taken, their right to water, to land, to the living veins of their homeland. Centuries ago, when the first Spanish boots crushed the red soil, when later governments parceled tribal lands like real estate, the Pueblo people were left with promises on paper and wells that ran dry. Water, once shared as life itself, became a battlefield. Do not fight with guns. They fight in courtrooms and conference rooms, in suits and moccasins, with maps that stretch across generations and stories that remember where the water once kissed the roots of corn. Lawyers say usage, allocation, federal rights, but to the people of San Felipe, it's simpler than that. Without water, there is no life. Without water, there is no prayer. There are houses today that sit near dry ditches, children growing up without the rivers their grandparents bathed in. Cornfields struggle, not because the people forgot how to grow, But because the water was rerouted, sold, restricted, even sacred springs were fenced off by outsiders, with deeds and court orders. One elder tells the story of a boy who asked why the river doesn't speak anymore. The elder didn't answer. He just walked with the boy in silence to the old bend. In the stream, now a cracked bed of dust. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. The Pueblo of San Felipe has long fought back not with fists, but with petitions, with united tribal councils, with quiet determination. When outsiders come to build pipelines or housing developments, the community pushes back with ancestral memory. They remind the world that these lands were not empty, that water was always part of a covenant between the people, the land, and the spirits who dwell in both. But progress doesn't pause. Roads are widened, reservoirs are drained, government projects ignore sacred geography, and still the Pueblo people stand. They speak at hearings. They educate their youth in both the law and the law. They form water coalitions, fight for clean access, and reclaim what has always been theirs, not just by treaty, but by birthright. And in these battles, something remarkable is happening. The younger generation is picking up the old fight with new tools. They carry laptops in case law alongside sacred corn pollen. They study environmental science, tribal law, hydrology, and they bring those skills home. Not to leave the old ways behind, but to defend them with modern armor. There's a quiet revolution rising in San Felipe. It's not televised, it doesn't trend online. But in every zoning meeting where a Pueblo voice is heard, in every grant won to protect riverbanks, in every irrigation ditch restored by community hands, that revolution gains ground. The people remember what the land looked like before concrete and contracts. They remember the smell of wet clay after a storm, the sound of frogs in spring. They remember the obligation to protect it all, not just for themselves, but for those yet unborn, because water isn't a resource to them. It's a relative. It's prayed to, sung for, respected, and though treaties failed, though governments shifted, though dams were built where stories once flowed, the people did not forget. They never will. A tribal leader once said, "They took the water out of our hands, but not out of our hearts." And now, hand by hand, heart by heart, the people of San Felipe are taking it back. The fight is far from over. But this chapter isn't about defeat. It's about resistance, born in silence, endurance sharpened by drought, and hope flowing like a stream returned to its course. Because the water remembers, and so do they. Beneath the ground, hidden in circles carved from stone and time, the heart of the Pueblo still beats. It pulses in the kiva, the sacred ceremonial chamber once nearly buried by shame, colonization, and silence. But it was never gone, only quiet, waiting. For years, dancers once danced under moonlight were replaced by silence. Drums once pounded in rhythm with thunder sat hushed. Children once taught the footwork of their ancestors instead learned to be still in boarding school hallways. The kiva doors were closed, and with them centuries of ceremony were pushed into shadow. But shadows cannot kill memory, and memory cannot be outlawed. Today, in San Felipe, something long sleeping is waking again. The kivas, round and humming with meaning, are being swept out and sung into life. The drums, their hides once cracked with age, are tightened, retuned, and returned to the center of the circle. And young men and women, once told their ways, were backward. Now step proudly into the dust with moccasins made of stories. Revival did not come all at once. It began in whispers. A song hummed quietly in a kitchen. A grandmother's tale repeated at dusk. A feather passed to a grandson who asked too many questions. Piece by piece, the cultural puzzle was reassembled by those brave enough to pick up what had been broken. The kiva, to the Pueblo, is more than a place. It is a womb of prayer, a place where spirits are met and danced with. It is round because the sacred has no edges, no hierarchy, no king, only circle, only communion. When a young boy descends into the kiva for the first time, he is not just learning the past, he is becoming part of it. The drum, too, is more than an instrument. It is a heartbeat made wood and hide. Each beat echoes the steps of those who came before. Grandfathers, storytellers, war captains, rain callers. When the drum speaks, time folds. Ancestors lean in. The ground listens, and the dance it is prayer. In motion, a moving offering to the corn, to the wind, to the spirit deer who still watches from the cliffside. Each step is a syllable, each turn a sentence, and together the dance tells stories no language can hold. You do not clap at the end, you listen. It wasn't easy to bring this back. There were decades where even speaking of the old ceremonies risked ridicule or punishment. Christian missions declared kivas pagan. Governments labeled them irrelevant. Outsiders tried to photograph what was never meant to be seen. But San Felipe held firm, quietly, fiercely, and now, on feast days, the plaza fills with color and rhythm. Once more, men wear turtle shell rattles on their calves. Women carry evergreen bows in their hands. Faces are painted, not for show, but for meaning: blue for sky spirits, black for strength, white for harmony. Tourists may see performance, but to the people, this is not a show. It is survival. The dancers are not choreographed. They are inherited, learned by watching, by doing. There are no manuals, no video tutorials, only breath passed mouth to mouth, generation to generation. And that is the magic of it. That is the defiance. When a San Felipe elder sees his granddaughter enter the circle for the first time, adorned in the clothing of their people, he does not weep from nostalgia. He weeps because the future has chosen to remember. Revival is not perfection. Some songs are still lost, some dances incomplete, but in every stomp of the foot, every beat of the drum, every whispered chant rising with dust, there is reclamation of voice, of space, of spirit. And just as the kiva remains hidden below the ground, layered beneath modern roads and roofs, so too does the Pueblo soul remain layered beneath it, all unbroken. This revival is not for tourists, not for history books. It is for them, for those who once danced under stars, for those who were punished for remembering, for those not yet born who deserve to dance without fear, and so they dance. Because revival is not just about honoring the past, it's about keeping the past alive long enough to carry it into the next circle, and that circle continues. As we now turn to a chapter where history and prophecy meet, where the battle for land, water, and voice shifts from the sacred to the legal, because sometimes, to protect the sacred, you have to learn the enemy's language. You might think the story of the Pueblo of San Felipe lives only in the past, buried in ruins, painted on old pottery, whispered in sacred dances. But if you walk the village roads today, you'll find something quietly powerful. Tradition isn't just surviving, it's being rewoven, one family at a time, in San Felipe. Homes are still shaped from earth, but inside them live smartphones. schoolbooks, and satellite dishes. The ancient and the modern sit side by side, not in conflict, but in balance. Children laugh while grinding corn on the same stone mattes their great-grandmothers used, then race back inside to finish homework. Or stream music. It's not nostalgia, it's reality. At the heart of this balance is family. Here, family isn't just who you live with. It's who teaches you the songs, who tells you where you come from, who sits next to you in the kiva even when you don't fully understand the ceremony. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all part of the learning. In San Felipe, every child belongs to the village, and every elder is a library. And yet, keeping these bonds strong is not easy. Some parents work long hours outside the pueblo. Others are raising children alone, juggling tradition with the pressures of the outside world. Fast food chains and social media lure young minds away from the values of silence, patience, and community. But inside many households, resistance blooms quietly. One grandmother sets aside part of each day to speak only in Caresta native language. One teenage boy, raised in two worlds, chooses to learn his people's dances rather than play sports at school. These small choices are acts of cultural revolution. Language is a fragile thread. For the Pueblo people, Keres is more than speech. The voice of the ancestors. It doesn't just describe the world, it sings it. There is no single word for mine in Keres, because ownership was not part of the old world view. There are 12 different ways to describe rain. Each carries a story. Today, Keres is at risk, but not yet lost. In kitchens, over bread dough and beans, it's spoken softly, naturally, by those who still remember. Schools are experimenting with immersion classes. Elders lead language circles, and some families commit to using only during meals. It's not easy, but it's happening. And beyond language, there's a deeper return happening. Spiritual one. More families are choosing to bring their children into the ceremonial circles earlier. Young people who left the Pueblo for work or college are coming back, bringing new knowledge with them and applying it to old systems, designing apps that teach Keres, documenting dances with permission, even starting businesses that honor traditional values. That these are not just cultural choices, they are survival strategies. Colonization tried to erase the Pueblo through missions, boarding schools, and legal theft. But San Felipe did not fold. It adapted, quietly, steadily, and today its families are doing what the government could never understand. They're rebuilding from the inside out. Ceremony still anchors life. Births are blessed. Deaths are mourned with sacred fire. Marriage is not just a union, but a spiritual agreement between families and the land. Some weddings still involve 7 days of preparation, 7 days of weaving together not just people but past, present, and future. Modernity is not rejected, it's reinterpreted. A boy learns coding in the morning and carries water for a sacred dance at dusk. A girl earns a degree in environmental law and uses it to defend sacred springs in court. The world isn't black and white, it's earth and clay, fiber and fiber optic, tradition and transition. The Pueblo's secret is this: they don't treat tradition as a museum piece, they treat it as a living fire, one that needs tending, feeding, protecting. And today, the fire burns in kitchens, in classrooms, on basketball courts, and inside the kiva. You can feel it in the stories told at bedtime. You can taste it in the first ears of corn. You can hear it in the hush before the dance begins, because for the people of San Felipe, Being Pueblo is not a costume you wear during feast days. It's a skin you carry every day. It's how you cook, how you speak, how you treat your elders, how you rise when the drums call, and tomorrow it will be how their children rise too. As we move toward the final chapter of this journey, we turn our eyes to the spirit behind it, or how the Pueblo of San Felipe has not only survived history, but woven their soul back into the soil. Because the true monument to this tribe is not stone or statue. It's memory, and the way memory is danced into the dust, sung into the seeds, and handed deliberately, lovingly from one breath to the next. The sun sets slowly over the mesa, but it doesn't disappear. It lingers, golden and defiant, warming the adobe walls one last time before dipping behind the horizon. In the Pueblo of San Felipe, that sunset is more than light, it's memory, and memory is the most sacred thing they carry. The echo is not a sound, it's a presence. It lives in the beat of the drum, in the hush before a prayer, in the footprints still visible on the ceremonial path, and it carries on through those who remember, through those who refuse to forget. This is not a story of preservation, it's a story of resistance. The Pueblo people were never meant to survive the arrival of Spain, or Mexico, or America. Their language was supposed to vanish. Their religion was supposed to be replaced. Their names, their faces, their earth, it was all meant to disappear. But it didn't. Because they didn't just bury their traditions, they planted them, and now, generations later, they're blooming again. The kiva drums still sound, not out of obligation, but out of soul. Young dancers step into the circle, not for show, but because something ancient calls them, something that cannot be translated into English, something that does not need to be explained to anyone outside the circle. Not everything must be understood. To be sacred, there is a beauty in that silence, a power in that refusal. San Felipe has learned how to carry culture like water, carefully, steadily, even through cracked land and broken systems. It's not perfect. The community still faces modern challenges: addiction, climate change, political boundaries that cut across sacred rivers. But even in struggle, the echo carries on. In the laughter of children learning Correas again, in the breath of grandmothers making bread before dawn, in the silence of fathers who remember the songs they were once forbidden to sing. Some echoes are loud, others are soft, but all are alive. Ask an elder what the future looks like, and they may not speak of technology or politics. They'll speak of the sacred, of the land, the dance, the language, of teaching children to recognize when the corn is ready, not by date, but by listening to the plants. That's the kind of future they fight for, one rooted in the past, but stretching endlessly forward. And what of those who left? Some return quietly, carefully carrying city lives and new ideas. Others never come back physically, but remember in their own way, lighting a candle on feast day, wearing a turquoise earring passed down through generations, saying a word before sleep. You don't have to live in the Pueblo to carry it. You just have to carry it with love, because being Pueblo is not a location. It's a way of standing in the world. It's how you walk, how you wait, how you listen. The San Felipe Pueblo teaches us something we don't hear enough in modern life: that survival is not the end of the story. Survival is just the doorway. What matters is what you build afterward, what you choose to sing into the wind. In the Pueblo, they sing gratitude for the corn, for the clay, for the mountain, for the people who never stopped dancing, even when the world tried to silence the drum. The final lesson is this: the echo only dies if no one answers it. But in San Felipe, the answer comes loud and clear with each sunrise over adobe rooftops, with each feather offered to the sky, with each prayer, each poem, each breath that speaks the old names. And so, the story doesn't end here. It walks beside us, now just out of sight, but always felt, because the echo carries on, and somewhere, in the shadow of the mesa, a child is learning the first beat of the drum.